All aboard. Welcome to Hamilton.
Where to begin? Anyway, let's get on board and travel through the history of Hamilton and the trains that came through here. Traveling through the pine lands, in the quiet pine forests of South Jersey, where the sandy soil seemed fit only for wild blueberries and scrub oak, few could have imagined that the distant whistle of a steam locomotive in 1854 would herald one of the most dramatic transformations in American agricultural history. The story of Hamilton and its railroad is not merely one of iron tracks and wooden ties, but of how transportation infrastructure could reshape an entire community's destiny. The Iron Horse arrives. The Camden and Atlantic Railroad began service to Atlantic City on July 4th, 1854, cutting a straight path through the New Jersey pinelands. This wasn't just another railroad line. It was a lifeline that would connect the agricultural potential of the region to the bustling markets of Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Wow, that's a lot of territory that it covers. Just imagine, and that's in 1854. The arrival of the Camden and Atlantic Railroad in 1854 prompted developer Charles K. Landis and Philadelphia banker Richard Burns to form Landis and Burns in 1856, acquiring large plots of land near the newly constructed railroad. The transformation was swift and decisive. What had been a small settlement that had shifted from glass production to farming strawberries and blueberries suddenly found itself at the center of a transportation revolution. The railroad didn't just serve the existing community, it moved it. Developers recognized that proximity to the tracks meant prosperity. And this is in 1854, just keep in mind. So they literally relocated the town center closer to the railway line, establishing the Hamilton Railroad Station in 1858. And now we head into the building of an agricultural empire. The railroad's impact went far beyond moving people. It created an agricultural empire that would eventually earn Hamilton the title Blueberry Capital of the World. Wonder if that name still exists today. Meaning if it's still relevant to being called the Blueberry Capital of the world today. Before becoming the blueberry mecca of today, Hamilton, so I guess it is, Hamilton was a rural town with a varied agriculture industry. Built in the 1800s, blueberries started to take the spotlight. The combination of ideal sandy soil and direct rail access to major metropolitan markets proved irresistible to farmers and entrepreneurs alike. Italian immigrants, drawn by the promise of fertile land and rail connections, began arriving in large numbers. The original DeMeo family blueberry farms were established in 1916 by Michael DeMeo. He came from the Abruzzo region of Italy with his two brothers. These families, along with countless others, would transform Hamilton's landscape into orderly rows of cultivated blueberry bushes, creating an industry that continues to thrive today. So there's the answer. It still exists today. The golden age of real luxury. The Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Lines, PRSL for short, took over operations and brought a new level of sophistication to rail service. But perhaps no train captured the imagination quite like the Blue Comet. That's something to look into in itself. What was the Blue Comet? I would love your input and feedback on what the Blue Comet was and anybody that has relevant info on the Blue Comet itself. And if anybody ever took or knows someone that was actually on the Blue Comet. Inaugurated on February 21st, 1929, the Blue Comet was designed to provide coach passengers with deluxe equipment, accommodations, and service at a regular coach fare. The luxurious blue and cream colored train was the jewel of the centered railroad of New Jersey throughout the Great Depression from 1929 to 1941. The Blue Comet wasn't just transportation, it was theater on rails. Each car was named after a different comet, enhancing the celestial theme and appealing to the public's fascination with astronomy. Passengers traveling through Hamilton could gaze out polished windows at endless rows of blueberry bushes while enjoying luxury that rivaled the finest hotels of the era. Decline and Renaissance. The automobile age brought changes that seemed to spell doom for rail service. By the 1950s, the PRSL had introduced rail diesel cars as a cost-cutting measure, but even these couldn't compete with the freedom of the highway. The Blue Comet made its final run in 1941, a victim of World War II and changing travel patterns. For decades, Hamilton's railroad station stood as a quiet reminder of busier times. The agricultural industry continued to thrive, but without the passenger trains that had once brought visitors and connected the community to the wider world. Then came the Renaissance. In 1989, New Jersey Transit recognized the continuing value of rail service and restored passenger service on the Atlantic City Line. The original downtown station was replaced with a modern facility featuring a park and ride lot, acknowledging that the railroad remained vital to the community's future, even if its role had evolved. Which is fascinating in itself, that even in 2025, that the same rail line is being used. We have to preserve our history. Legacy of the rails. Today, as New Jersey Transit trains still stop in Hamilton, they carry the echoes of that transformative moment in 1854. The railroad that once moved Italian immigrants to blueberry farms now carries commuters to jobs in Philadelphia and New York. The same tracks that bore the elegant Blue Comet now support modern electric trains, serving a community that has grown far beyond what those early developers could have imagined. The blueberry industry they helped create continues to flourish. Modern farms, like Atlantic Blueberry Company, owned by the Gelada family for over 75 years, and Blueberry Bill Farms, offering the highest quality fresh blueberries for over 55 years, stand a testament to the agricultural empire that the railroad made possible. The first cultivated blueberry was successfully grown in 1916, just as the railroad reached its peak influence. While modern mechanical pickers have replaced much hand harvesting, the fundamental equation remains unchanged. Hamilton's location on the railroad continues to provide the transportation infrastructure that makes its agricultural success possible. From a small glass-making settlement to the self-proclaimed blueberry capital of the world, Hamilton's story is ultimately one of how transportation infrastructure can reshape not just geography, but destiny itself. The railroad didn't just connect Hamilton to the world, it made Hamilton what it is today.
All aboard at Franklinville. Let's go. Continue to join me on this journey. Hop on board.
So unfortunately, Franklinville doesn't have much info that I could pull on to research the history of the trains here. But there is a train station here that you can visit if you want, and you could get to see a little bit of the Franklinville train station, or that little piece of track that's here. Interesting enough, the town of Franklinville used to get called Little Ease, which is an interesting name and something interesting to think about, something interesting to look into. The other piece I would mention is basically come visit Franklinville. It's a piece of history. Unfortunately, to the research that I was able to do, they're not giving me much of history. I'm not getting much of history about Franklinville, and I would love your thoughts and opinions, and share your input if you were able to find anything put it in the comments. I would love to see it, because the research that I did, I couldn't find anything. So let's continue on this journey.
Hop on board at Woodstown. Let's go. Hop on board.
At this point, we're actually heading into Woodstown, New Jersey. Are you ready? Let's go. The morning mist clings to the rails like memories of a bygone era, and somewhere in the distance, the haunting whistle of a train echoes across Salem County. This is the sound of history awakening, the story of tracks that have carried dreams, commerce, and countless souls across the New Jersey countryside for more than 160 years. In 1853, when America was still finding its industrial footing, visionaries chartered the West Jersey Railroad with grand ambitions to connect the Delaware River ports with the Atlantic coast. The Civil War was still a decade away, and the young nation was hungry for the transformative power of steam and steel. But Woodstown, the very community that would eventually give its name to this historic line, initially found itself on the wrong side of progress. Local residents, perhaps skeptical of these iron beasts or unwilling to invest in an uncertain future, declined to provide the financial backing the railroad required. The tracks would bypass their town entirely, threading instead through Pittstown, now known as Elmer, leaving Woodstown to watch opportunity roll past their doorstep. As the nation teetered on the brink of civil war in 1861, workers began the back-breaking labor of grading the roadbed. With shovels, pickaxes, and sheer determination, they carved a path through South Jersey's rolling landscape. The rhythmic pounding of hammers on spikes began in 1862, as the first rails were carefully laid atop hand-hewn wooden ties. By 1863, while Gettysburg was reshaping the nation's destiny, Salem County celebrated the completion of its first railroad line. For nearly 9 decades, the Salem branch hummed with activity. Steam locomotives thundered along the tracks, their black smoke trailing like ribbons against the sky. Passengers dressed in their finest clothes boarded wooden coaches bound for Philadelphia, Atlantic City, or points unknown. Freight cars laden with South Jersey's agricultural bounty, tomatoes, corn, and peaches, rolled toward hungry urban markets. The railroad became the circulatory system of rural Salem County, pumping life and commerce through communities that had once been isolated islands in a sea of farmland. Children pressed their faces against schoolhouse windows to wave at passing trains, and depot platforms buzzed with the social energy of arrivals and departures. But like many American railroad stories, this one carried the seeds of its own decline. The automobile was transforming how people moved through the world, and improved highways offered a flexibility that fixed rails could never match. Bus routes and personal cars began siphoning passengers away from the iron road, something that we could keep in mind, and just something to think about is no matter how cars and no matter what came afterwards, trains and trail lines still get used today for commerce, for passengers, we modernize the technology, but we still use the same concepts over and over and over again. With cars using horsepower, trains using horsepower. At the end of the day, everything boils down and goes back to, no matter how many years back, early 1800s, 1700s, early 1900s. It's not going to make a difference. Everything goes back to times in history, and just talking about these and traveling the roads and traveling and walking these paths and seeing these modern trains, but at the same time seeing these rail lines, we get to be able to witness true and honest history. December 30th, 1950, dawned cold and unremarkable, but for the Salem branch, it marked the end of an era. The last scheduled passenger train pulled away from the platform that day, its whistle fading into history. For more than 70 years, the tracks would carry only the occasional freight train and the whispers of what once was. The steel rails remained embedded in their gravel beds like archaeological artifacts. Weeds grew between the ties, and the old right-of-way became a corridor for deer and wandering thoughts. Local residents would sometimes walk the abandoned tracks, their footsteps echoing those of countless travelers who had once ridden this route to distant places and new beginnings. By the early 21st century, America was rediscovering its railroad heritage. Heritage tourism was booming, and communities across the nation were breathing new life into abandoned rail lines. Salem County's leaders recognized that their sleeping railroad held untapped potential as both a tourist attraction and a living museum. Enter SMS Rail Lines, a company with a passion for preserving railroad history and expertise in heritage operations. They saw what others had overlooked: the Salem branch's potential as a window into America's golden age of railroading. Working with county officials, they developed plans to transform a portion of the old line into something magical, a time machine on rails. The Woodstown Central is born. November 2022 marked a triumphant return after more than 7 decades of silence. Passenger trains once again rolled along the Salem branch. The newly christened Woodstown Central Railroad emerged as a subsidiary of SMS Rail Lines, operating on county-owned tracks between Woodstown and Swedesboro. But this wasn't just any tourist train. The centerpiece of the operation was an authentically restored 1930s passenger train. Its Art Deco styling and period details, meticulously preserved, stepped aboard, was like entering a living museum where the golden age of American railroading came alive through polished brass, warm wood paneling, and the gentle rhythm of steel wheels on steel rails. Today, as passengers settle into vintage seats and peer through period windows at the South Jersey countryside, they're experiencing more than just a scenic train ride. They're participating in an unbroken chain of human experience that stretches back to the Civil War era. The same rails that once carried Civil War era farmers to market now transport families on weekend adventures and railroad enthusiasts on journeys of discovery. The Woodstown Central has become Salem County's premier heritage attraction, welcoming visitors from across the Delaware Valley and beyond. Each excursion offers something different: seasonal foliage tours, special holiday trains, and educational programs that bring railroad history to life for new generations. As the restored 1930s cars glide along the historic right-of-way, passengers can almost hear the echoes of conversations from decades past. Business deals struck in parlor cars, love stories begun on depot platforms, and children's laughter mixing with the clickety-clack of wheels on rails. The story of the Woodstown Central Railroad is ultimately about the power of perseverance and vision. From a line that bypassed its namesake town in the 1860s to a heritage railroad that now bears Woodstown's name with pride. This railway has come full circle. The tracks that once carried the commerce of a growing nation now carry something equally precious. The memories and dreams of a community that refused to let its history fade away. As the train whistles echo across Salem County once again, they carry a message, both ancient and modern. Some journeys are worth preserving, and some destinations are best reached by looking backward to move forward. The rails of time continue to stretch into the distance, inviting new generations to climb aboard and discover where the Iron Road might take them next.
Hop on board at Glassboro. Let's go.
We are on to our last stop, for at least for this video, in Glassboro, New Jersey. There's a rich railroad history dating back to the mid-1800s. Let's just go through some basics. There's 22-mile long Millville and Glassboro Railroad. The MNG rail line was built by a group of Millville businessmen independently of the West Jersey Railroad. Chartered on March 9th, 1859 and incorporated in March 1859. The MNG was completed and opened in October 1860. The West Jersey Train Depot was built in 1863 and became a central hub for the community. The former West Jersey and Seashore Line freight station served as both a telegraph office and hub of commercial activity in Glassboro from 1871 to 1971. At the height of activity, West Jersey Depot saw more than 100 freight and passenger trains pass through each day. In May 4th, 1896, the Pennsylvania Railroad consolidated all of its railroads and several smaller properties in South Jersey into the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad formerly leased the West Jersey and Seashore Railroad on July 1st, 1930. The line was electrified between 1906 and 1949. This electrification was part of modernization efforts to improve service efficiency. The train station played an integral role in development of Glassboro. It fueled local industry and higher education, which it happens to be. There is a college, or university, Rowan University, directly across the street from the Glassboro current station. They ended service in the mid-20th century. In 1968, New York Central Railroad was merged into the PRR, becoming Penn Central, which was bankrupt by 1970. The last passenger train ran in 1971, so passenger service in Glassboro officially stopped in 1971. And then you had bus service that became the public transportation and forced the railroad companies to cut funding for passenger trains, at least in Glassboro. And the current station that we see now is just a piece of history that's here and something that we could really, look forward to be able to really see. Now, looking to the future, the GCL is a proposed 18-mile passenger rail line restoring passenger rail service along the existing rail corridor between Glassboro and Camden in South Jersey. This would restore passenger rail service to the area for the first time since 1971, which would actually be really cool to see. I would love to look more into that, and I would love to hear your feedback or anybody that knows more info on when this is actually going to happen. Alright, that's the end of this video, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Put in the comments where I should go next. Where would you want me to go next? What stations do you want me to focus on next? Let's continue on this journey together.